Much gratitude for joining us today, and welcome to the John Minnie podcast, where we explore all things urban horticulture, indoors and out, through the perspectives of the many amazing people who have made it their career. I'm your host, Mark Minnie, president of John Minnie Distinctive Landscapes, and at John Minnie, our team's purpose is to make places beautiful by bringing nature to the places people live, work, and play. Today, we'll be sitting down with two teammates from the John Minnie team in New York, Liana Hutchin and Phil Adams. Together, they have over 17 years of experience working on and providing solutions for urban landscapes. In today's episode, Phil and Liana partake in our reoccurring conversation on how to balance aesthetics, sustainability, and functionality in the urban landscape. They'll share how they think about these three aspects in their craft. We'll touch on the many functions an urban landscape can serve, why aesthetics, functionality, and sustainability are always in balance and intertwined with one another. And interestingly, you'll see the conversation shift heavily towards sustainability, despite it not always being the first or even the second thing considered when developing the urban landscape. Without further ado, let's head over to our conversation with Liana and Phil. Liana, Phil, welcome to the John Minnie podcast.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to sit down with you guys. You're two of my teammates, obviously, here at John Minnie. I enjoy, I said this to you last time, Liana, you were on here. I enjoy when we have the chance to talk. You guys are both passionate about your craft, and just when we have conversation about our work, I always leave with some thought-provoking insights. So today should be fun, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
excited about it.
Yeah, definitely. So we are jumping into our ongoing discussion of how we think about balancing aesthetics, sustainability, and functionality in the urban landscape. Phil, we were just talking about this before hitting the record button, but this is going to be a conversation we're going to revisit in the future. It's going to be an ongoing one with varying guests in future episodes, because we just feel like it's a nice framework to start with to spark constructive conversation about how we think through the design and development of urban landscapes. And it's important to shed light from different guests, right, and different perspectives, because, people are going to provide those different perspectives on how these three aspects may be balanced in different ways, right, to execute a successful landscape. So with that said, let's dive right in. All right.
Great.
So I think we'll start in the simplest manner, which is, why don't you guys start by sharing your own definitions of aesthetics, sustainability, and functionality when referring to urban landscapes?
Sure.
Don't be shy. We're looking at each other. Who's going to go first?
Kick it off here. I don't know if you want me to, but how I approach this is like individual definitions. So I guess aesthetics, I think of like visual appeal. Functionality is how does that work within the space, whatever the product or service is. And then sustainability is a lot broader than those, because it takes a lot of different forms and it can be exercised in so many different ways. But I wrote down a definition because I feel like it deserved some thought. So I wanted to kind of read that. And this is kind of how I see sustainability, which is the research, development, and implementation of initiatives that aim to mitigate environmental stress or even benefit the environment in which our products and services interact with. So I kind of like to think of it as in the same way, like an ecosystem, there's a lot of things that have to be in balance for that ecosystem to thrive. There's not one species that you need to, have goals for. So the same thing for sustainability. It takes a lot of smaller initiatives to make up that bigger goal. So just it's all encompassing.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I did not write a nice definition of sustainability like yours. So, but what I did do, I agree with you with the ecology benefits and the benefits to the environment with sustainability, whether it's, sourcing things that are locally made. Even I was thinking sustainability, even like whether it's made in the US, not even just, that eliminates all the shipping from overseas and things like that. That's sustaining communities nearby. I didn't think of it just as environmental. I thought of it like the greater picture of like, how does that sustain that area? With aesthetics, I agree. Appeal, beauty, and functionality. I had very similar answers as well with use and like, what is that space intended for? Is it a viewing garden, or is it a street tree with some flowers underneath it? So how does that interact with the surrounding environment?
Interesting. So like when I know you guys, so I kind of figured there wouldn't be like, oh, let's refine and define aesthetics that much, because I don't know, when we talk about landscapes, I feel like we're all on the same page on what do we mean by like aesthetics. But definitely like a little broader on sustainability, and I want to dive into there, but also functionality. I envisioned like being like, how do we define functionality? And I guess a good follow-up question is like, what are the different functions an urban landscape can serve in your guys' minds?
I think there's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
So Phil touched on one of them. I think visual impact, like, outside of a window, let's say. So that's one. Another function could be like a more physical thing, like a barrier of some sort. You can have plants that create like a visual wall or screening or something. They could be there to support the wellness efforts within the space and more of like the psychological benefits. That could be a function of it. Some people want to put them in there to improve air quality. I think there's like a lot of different reasons for having it, and all of those are a function of the greenery that's in the space.
Absolutely. And to kind of pick up on that, I have like cooling with the heat island effect with street trees and plants. Anytime we can soften the hardscape of an urban environment, you're only going to help reduce the overall heat of that, what the concrete or impermeable surface is absorbing. Something else that function can help with is habitat within the diverse urban environment. And I actually put down aesthetics as a form of function.
Sure, agree.
Because it ties all together. Those two play in hand pretty close.
Yeah, I agree. And I was thinking through a bunch too. Like there's, the function can be to be a productive landscape from a sense of like agriculture and food production in the urban environment, like a specific, you could be developing, like the urban landscape can be very intentionally integrated to design like a specific workspace in a commercial setting, or there could be stormwater management, an outdoor respite, right? But I think like you guys kind of covered some of those, and I think that when you start to list out the functionalities, it helps put it in perspective that, we're talking about a balance of these three things, but it's, a lot of those things are overlapping, right? Like the function could be to provide a respite. That's beautiful, right? Well, now we're talking about aesthetics too, but we haven't talked about sustainability, right? Or it could be, cooling effects, right? So maybe we're starting to talk about sustainability and specific function, but, they're not ever really, well, they may be, but they're not typically like isolated in any one of these aspects. But how do we balance those is the interesting part, I think. So let's dive deeper into sustainability. Are you thinking through like, well, how do I put together an urban landscape that is, beneficial for the environment? Or are you also like end product? Or are you also thinking about, all the materials, the logistics, the product that go into it, and like the supply chain before, that happens before you even like arrive at building and installing that landscape?
Yeah, you're always thinking about like functionality. How are you going to get a product delivered and installed, or a landscape delivered and installed? If you need, when you have to bring a crane in to bring a large tree, that tree is being removed from somewhere, being trucked into New York City or any environment, and then a big diesel crane is now operating to pick this thing up. Like there's not a ton of sustainability going on there. And now that tree is is stressed, no matter how well cared that tree was. And that goes for every plant that gets planted. A plant is most stressed at time of planting because it's been disturbed. The roots have been disturbed. But I think choosing the right plant or right product for the space can help create a sustainable environment now in the new space it's in.
Got it.
Yeah, I think that's an important consideration, is really the ending landscape. Like, how is this going to live after we've got it installed, right? Because otherwise, all of this work that's gone into it, all of the effects on the environment of getting this product or plant like up here when it's taken from the ground, all the greenhouse gases from the car emissions and everything, if all of that, and then you put a plant in that's not going to live, then it was all for nothing. So, and then you might have to do it all over again. So I think you almost have to work backwards to like the overall goal is, if we're going to do this and have these impacts, then we better make sure that the landscape that we're doing it for is going to sustain itself as well.
Interesting. So we're like talking about longevity is like a big factor of sustainability too. Now, is that that I feel like this is a really interesting conversation. Let me dig a little deeper. I agree. Like generally, right? Like when you think about those three things and you're focusing on sustainability, well, and I really want to lean into that in an urban landscape, I better, design and install a landscape that's going to live, right, and last and provide the benefits that I intended to. It is not just going to, go into shock and die or have challenges, right away and create, more resource use to fix it. Now, is any landscape that stands the test of time necessarily a positive thing from a sustainability standpoint?
I think it depends on what plant is there. We'll call it plants for now. Like whether it's lawn, is lawn sustainable? No, but lawns have been, a real Americanized product, and some lawns are hundreds of years old. But how much chemical and fertilizers and constant maintenance is put into that lawn? So is that sustainable? Probably not. So a tree that's absorbing groundwater to prevent flooding in streets, that's sustainable. If that tree, like a row of London plane trees, they like wet feet. They absorb a lot of water. They're great street trees. To answer your question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point, right? Like, so if you install and design, or you design and install a landscape, and your pure intent, and we're talking like the extreme of like my pure intention is to deliver the most sustainable landscape. So I build a landscape that's going to last and live a really long time. But if that landscape, is resource intensive, or I think another factor would be like, say you installed a bunch of plants that are invasive or negative impact to the local ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Like, well, then it's not really great that you built a landscape with longevity in mind. How does sustainability rank for you guys when thinking through these aspects of designing and developing an urban landscape?
So I'll be honest, it's not my number one, and I feel like I have a good reason for it. So
okay.
I feel like when you're starting with sustainability, it's kind of like, it's so open-ended. Like we said, we just touched on so many different topics. It's like, where do you begin? You kind of need to have a concept or a purpose. And to have those, you kind of need to have a function, a form and function, like we said, the aesthetics and like, what is the landscape doing? What are we trying to achieve within the space? And then from there, how can we do it better by incorporating some more sustainable alternatives into it? So I always think of it as like a second step to help support or make better the first step.
Second or third, right? Like
function. Yeah. I don't know what's first.
Form and aesthetics, and then it's interesting.
I guess third. I don't want to keep moving it down the line.
Well, there's only three.
All right, it's staying there. So I do think, in my opinion, I think function comes first.
Okay.
Without a doubt. And this is just based on meeting with different clients over time. And the very first thing we talk about is like, what are you trying to do with your space? Like, what are your goals? Are like, maybe they need a block like an ugly AC unit or something, or maybe they just want to enhance the reception area, or they have an empty courtyard that they want to make usable for their tenants. So like there's going to be a function of the space first. And then it's like, okay, well, what do you want that to look like? And then we start incorporating some general concepts. And then I feel like you can't look at sustainable options until you have what you're looking to do.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's an order that can go a blanket statement across for every project. I think some clients are always going to say
politically correct answer.
right.
No, I'm just messing with you.
Well, right, yeah, exactly. But some clients say, "Oh, like low maintenance. I want no maintenance. I don't want anyone to come and maintain, or I don't want to have to put an irrigation system in." Like, is an irrigation system sustainable? It's using water. There's power that's associated with it. Unless you're able to recycle it or gather it from a gray water system or a well, that's not you. Like you're pulling it out of the groundwater. You're not using municipal. But irrigation systems on large estates can run all day long. Watering different aspects. So that's definitely not sustainable. Just so their plants are green. But as far as like the order goes, I agree with Liana. Is it number one? I put number one because I wanted to, because I wanted to think that way. But after hearing Liana's answer, I'm second guessing mine, and I think function and aesthetics are hand in hand, but sustainability is something that I think is always kind of churning in the background, but where it ties in, I think does fall in like second or third.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because you guys are pros too. So you're very good at, thinking through. It's not just about my personal preferences, right? You're serving a client and your client is serving end users and impacting many people. So like, obviously everyone's perspective matters. So there's I guess there's a fun conversation with what is your personal ranking versus well, how do you live in reality, which is in the professional setting with the customer and the end users, and how do you approach these three things in that situation?
The one answer could be two in the same, if that makes sense. So like your example with the trees soaking up groundwater could be looked at as a sustainable tactic, but it could also be a function. So
and beauty.
Yeah. Well, yes, eventually. Yeah. So, if you're thinking about which one you thought about first, it's well, I don't know. You could argue that those are both the top two. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
no, and we're just arbitrarily ranking them, but they're not isolated, right?
Right. They're not exclusive.
Personally, I'm actually almost similar. It feels like I think I tend to lean heavy on functionality and beauty, aesthetics. But that's not to say you can't achieve that without also integrating very sustainable aspects into your landscape, 100%. If not 100%. And we go back to function. I think one of the important functions we deliver is this, this respite. We live in cities, which is a high stimuli environment, and a function we serve is providing, moments of respite, connections to nature, whether it be small or big with urban landscapes. And also by nature, cities are very sustainable in general. They use less resources. They have, shared resources such as public transit, less land use management with more people living in denser areas. So by nature, cities are kind of good for the environment, but we can't not serve the other needs of people who live and work in those cities, which is, well, I'm in this high stimuli environment. I need these connections to nature, or I need a break in my day where I can go walk in a park or a landscape terrace or something that can, provide me that balance, so that's a very specific function that might be designed without, sustainability, very granular sustainability tactics in mind. So I'm kind of in your guys' camp. I actually lean towards those two before sustainability for specific reasons, but not forgetting about sustainability either.
I might start asking that question to clients. Where does it kind of order? How important is sustainability to somebody? It's not a question that I've ever
That's a good question.
Asked.
Yeah.
And it could spark someone and say, very important. And then we could start finding, extreme locally sourced. That's almost like a lead, almost like a lead certified building. Like you have to buy within certain radius of the project.
Yeah.
So it's a great question to start asking.
Interesting. So generally what has been your read on how our clients are thinking about these three facets? Are like,
I think it's the tie between aesthetic and functionality, and then
obviously depends on like
they're not even. I don't think they're even thinking sustainable.
But are you introducing that consideration or other considerations when it doesn't come up? Like, hey, like,
yeah, absolutely. Okay. I try to limit my like seasonal flower, so if I can use a perennial to replace a summer flower, I will, because that doesn't need to be replaced every so many months. Sure. So in those aspects, absolutely.
Sure. Like so subtle, like moves to serve the aesthetics by introducing like more sustainable practices. And how are you handling that with the customer? Are you just, presenting those solutions, or are you actually like saying like, hey, this is what I want to do and this is why?
I think some comes down to cost. Sure. Cost always has a driving factor in a lot of these solutions. And when you can save a client multiple or some money up front by saying, hey, you buy this today, you don't have to have that reoccurring cost. They like that. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be an aesthetic beauty for that product. There's a little bit of an educational aspect of it too, though.
Sure. I guess to keep going with the customer, when it comes to urban landscape design and development, it's probably like a sticky question. You're saying like they're typically not thinking sustainability. They're going to, like, when you're fact finding with them, they're going to, aesthetics or, specific function they want out of it. Is the customer always right when it comes to designing and developing an urban landscape? You're both smiling at me. Said it was a sticky question.
No, I don't think so. I think so. They're coming to us for our expertise and our experience, and our job is to provide them with different solutions, right? So if we think that there might be a better option out there, a more sustainable option, which is possible. They're not in our industry, so they might not know everything that we know. We might be able to have some better insight than they do, but not all the time. I mean, sure. It's just a case by case basis. But I know we're definitely in the customer service business. There is that saying, like, customer's always right. You want to keep your clients happy, and of course that's our goal. But if we think that they could be happy and still provide sustainable solutions, like, it's a no-brainer.
I agree. The client is essentially, they're funding that project. So I think if they have a very specific request, we can guide them in a way of delivering that request in the best sustainable option. I have a client currently who wants cactus, and they're asking us to store them over winter. How sustainable is that? We have to go in with a truck, bring back planters with cactus, store them in a heated greenhouse, and then redeliver them months later. Is that sustainable? I think we got to balance that piece. So there's that. I also wanted to mention, like, we have a lot of different types of clients. We have homeowners, we have board members who are part of a large organization. Then we also have commercial businesses who have terraces or indoor courtyards and atriums. So I think we have a wide range of clients that might have ample experience in horticulture or indoor plants or outdoor landscaping. So I think you got to be careful with, like, is the client right or wrong? We don't know their background either.
True.
And it's like you can't. Every situation is different too. I mean, that's what you said. Like, or you're alluding to is like every site's different, every customer is different. Some customers might be thinking about sustainability more, though. We tend to see more aesthetics and function first. And again, it's like sometimes, I like stoke the fire. It's like, is the customer always right and putting you on the spot? But it's not even about that. It's, I think you use the word solution, right? Sometimes it's, they're exploring, and that's kind of why they come to us. And we like to explore, like, how do we make these things work? It's a wild request. Like, how do we get cactus to be in an outdoor urban landscape? It's like, well, it's a pretty crazy situation, but we're the team that'll explore like solutions to like figure something out that works. Exactly. Right. And sometimes it is like delivering a solution that meets their marks of aesthetics or this very specific function they want, but like integrating more, thoughtful and sustainable, approaches that don't deviate far from what they're hoping function and aesthetic wise. Now you said, right, we deal with a lot of different landscapes, and you alluded to indoor settings as well. And we haven't really touched on that. How do you think through sustainability in urban indoor landscapes?
So I think this could be interpreted a couple ways. So one obvious thing is planters and where you get those from. There are obviously vendors that have more sustainable options. So that's a more direct one. But then as far as like designing goes with putting the right plant in the right place, and we touched on this earlier, is we're bringing up our plants from far away because we obviously don't live in a tropical environment in New York and New Jersey. So we're using that transportation to get these plants down from Florida or wherever else to bring them up. So we got to be speccing something that's going to live in that indoor environment so that we're not doing that process all over again. Mm-hmm. So in that way, we're, thinking about sustainability and longevity again. Mm-hmm. So those two are, I think, like the main things that I think about. And this is, I guess, kind of arguably sustainability and a whole nother topic, but I always think about the wellness behind it and the sustainability of it. Because I think that humans as well should be considered as part of the environment. You mentioned this before, and the sustainability of the occupants in these buildings should be put into consideration with the stress and, the work environment, the hustle and bustle of New York City that everyone knows of is like trying to keep everyone calm and productive and relieve stress and get them focused. So their mental well-being should be put into consideration as well. And the greenery that we're providing helps with that. So it's also aiding in, sustaining the workforce too. And you want to look at it kind of an out of the box way.
Sure. No, I don't think it's that out of the box. I love it that you went there. I mean, this is like, I'm biased because this is like, I agree 100% with that perspective. And I'm not saying like I have the right answer. This is like my perspective, because I do think it's hard to like, ROI, or like think about maybe it's not a return on investment, like, net impact to society and people versus net impact to environment. When you look at like the whole supply chain, it's like, all right, well, I got to ship these plants from somewhere. How much resources went into like cultivating these plants and growing them? Then the trucking and logistics to get them into the site. All right, so you're adding up all this net impact on the environment, but it's not just the landscape's net impact on the environment. Afterwards, you're measuring it against, you also have to measure it against societal costs, like the impact on the people who are interacting with the landscape, that are impacted by the landscape. And it's hard to measure that, but I do believe, I do personally try to connect the dot pretty directly from that function of the landscape, which I think is, aesthetics and or connection to nature, or, whatever benefit or function you're delivering the landscape indoors or out, to be to sustainability in dense and urban environments, because by nature, cities are more sustainable, but they're not going to be habitable if you don't make them habitable with things such as, and it's not like just our product and services, right? Things that allow people to function in a high stimuli and busy and stressful environments such as the city. But landscapes are a beautiful way to provide that respite and connection to nature, thus making it feasible to live in a city I don't think it's that out of the box way to think about it.
I agree.
Cool.
I want to add a couple more things. I totally agree with the pots, sustainable pots, and the shipping aspects. A couple other things that I had noted down was for sustainable plantings in the indoor world would be like cooling. If there's a large plant near a window that can prohibit the air conditioning from turning on, like all the time in the summertime, that's having a sustainable effect. Look, if the sun was beating down on you here and there was a large leafed plant that was able to cool you and maybe not have direct impact of the sunlight, I think so. I have quantity of plants inside. Like, can overplanting be unsustainable in a landscape, indoor or outdoor? Like, is there too much that's going to create,
Never. No, I'm just kidding.
How dare you say that?
But the humidity will increase if there's too many plants. And does that have an adverse effect on the building or the people in the building and in that room or wherever it might be? So there's that. And then the other one I wanted to mention was, this is positive, impact for future planting. So maybe someone sees a plant and they say, oh, I love that plant, I want that for my home. And then they bring it home and then they buy more and more plants for their home. And then it turns into an outdoor love of plants as well. And that spreads into their neighborhood. And there can be a snowballing effect to having our greenery and product anywhere it can be.
Great. Yeah, I think, 100%. I think often high profile or iconic landscapes do have that snowball effect. I mean, the High Line is, a great example of a very popular
it's a style now.
Yeah, park that like had a snowball effect. People like wanted to get more involved in many things, urban landscaping, right? Like, the types of plants that they use there, the style, the aesthetics, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely was a snowball effect. That's a really good point. We talked about, our personal perspectives and balancing these three general aspects of the urban landscape. The customer. Do you ever find yourself, navigating, difficult conversations or situations with collaborators of, urban landscapes, whether it be architects, designers, or landscape architects, and how you balance these aspects of the urban landscape?
Yes. And I think we have a little bit different perspectives on each project. So if you're coming from the landscape architect or designer architect side of things, you're typically on the front end of the project, whereas we're looking more at the back end of it because we maintain the landscapes as well. So like, how functional and sustainable is it once it's actually installed? So sometimes there's just a little bit of back and forth with finding that right balance between what they're trying to achieve and what works.
True.
I agree. I think as a profession in its entirety, the maintenance aspect of landscapes when they're getting maintained, especially a new landscape, if it's not being properly maintained, that's a direct reflection on the landscape architect or the designer. And in many cases, it might not be the company not maintaining it or the landscape contractor. It might be the client who's choosing not to maintain it. So maintenance of not just the newly installed plants, but of the weeds and debris that's in the garden and whoever the porter that's maintaining the grounds around it. That's such an important piece of that puzzle. There's a lot that goes into that.
So how are you using? Interesting. So, are you using those three aspects at all in conversation? Like, preserving, whether it be the aesthetics or the function of the landscape, or certain sustainability efforts.
Maybe all three.
All three. Yeah. I was, I kind of laughed because I was like, well, what about like cost too and economics? Are you even like factoring that?
I mean, that's the most important one with the why is the client choosing maybe choosing not to maintain their garden the way the landscape architect wanted to because of cost.
Mhm.
It might be cost prohibitive for whatever reason.
Cost prohibitive, and sometimes maybe not. Maybe the education is, it could be, it depends on the situation in the landscape, right? It could be like, while the maintenance costs associated with preserving the original, whether it be aesthetic and balance of aesthetics, sustainability, and function, the maintenance cost might be X of dollars, but that could be less than like the what if scenarios if you don't maintain it properly from the get-go too.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
One other thing I had is artificial has been really popular all of a sudden.
Interesting.
In the outside
I feel like
world.
there's a can of worms in this conversation.
Artificial is
faux, as we like to say sometimes.
Yeah, faux.
Yeah. You're like grimacing over there. You're like, I don't. So you feel negative about it?
I am negative about it. I think that there's a plant for the right space, and faux necessarily isn't the answer. And a lot of times, it's not coming out of like the landscape architect world. It's more so designer or someone who wants to have low maintenance gardens. But you introduce faux, and the sustainability aspect is, in my opinion, that's gone because pollinators no longer are going there. What's that have to do with erosion or what's it called? Absorption of stormwater, like all these aspects. So what negative does it come? And that has to be replaced every so many years. It doesn't have an unlimited lifespan. So
yeah, in your perspective, it can't serve the sustainability of the landscape in any capacity, just like purely aesthetics and function.
I mean, yeah, aesthetics is, and I think that's even getting smaller.
Stretch it in your mind. Tell us how you really feel.
Oh. I am.
What about you from the indoor? It sounds like you're talking about it from like.
I'm talking about from an outdoor perspective.
Outdoor urban landscape perspective. Yeah. What about an indoor?
I'm not pro faux, but I think that it serves a purpose. And just to play devil's advocate, we talked about the wellness of greenery within the space. If there are spaces that really there is no right plant for that space, it's completely dark, or maybe it's a space that's super high up that's just not accessible for maintaining. But you want to have that visual greenery there to kind of give the same psychological benefits that live greenery would. So in that way, I do think it could serve the wellness purpose. Sure. But yes, of course, faux is mostly, plastics, and it's not made from sustainable materials. So I'm not completely against it.
Fair enough. Cool. I'm gonna shift to some questions to I think put the conversation into context. I guess the first is, do you think this is an important conversation to keep going?
Absolutely. I think.
And why?
I 100% think it's an important conversation. I think that this conversation is going to evolve, and I look forward to hearing other conversations about it. I think speaking about these three aspects and how we can introduce these to clients, and then maybe they take that and turn it to a board and they ask the same three questions to a board. I think there's a really cool conversation that is about to happen with not just in here, but with clients all over the city.
Cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that it's important to, like you said, we're going to see how this evolves, but it's important to keep ourselves educated on different topics and shifts and, things that are going to be maybe sustainable today might not be tomorrow. Who knows? Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see how this topic evolves through different people that you speak with. And then over time, maybe we'll look back and be like, I can't believe we thought that. Maybe that's not true anymore. I'm sure I'll listen back and think, why did I like faux back?
maybe I'll like faux.
Maybe. There you go.
But yeah, I think it's very important. And also to Phil's point that he mentioned earlier, a lot of our clients aren't maybe thinking about sustainable practices within their landscape. A lot of it that we're getting is aesthetics and function. So by speaking about this topic, hopefully that ripple effect, getting other people to think about it in that way too. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really important. Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think you made like a really important point about, research, right? Like what we know today is only what we know today, right? In the future, we're going to know more. We're going to learn more. And I think from like research and experience and further societal shifts really will inform and shape the conversation going forward. We talk about aesthetics and sustainability and functionality, but maybe it needs to be more complex and more granular of a framework, something we'll only learn through further conversation and experience, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Final thoughts or things maybe you think are missing from the conversation?
I think I just want to, encourage and stay eager towards education, but also note that like every little bit helps, right? If like there's so many different ways you can come at sustainability and what you're doing, and one, you're not going to change the world, but if you could, fix one thing or find a better solution for one small thing, that could, like Phil said, snowball. And so I guess don't be discouraged by the overwhelming idea that there is so much that can be done. It's just take little steps.
Yeah, and it's really well said. And it's a balance, right? Like, so you can serve aesthetics and function something and take little steps to like serving those things by also making more sustainable step by step.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better. It's little steps that add up to a larger well-being for the city and planet.
Cool. All right. You're not off yet. I have, I don't know if you know yet, first time you're doing an episode with us, but we always have a final question, unrelated possibly to today's episode. But, we're a passionate team. So what are you guys currently going deep on in your craft, something that you're maybe particularly passionate about right now in your work?
I'll take it. I've been really focusing on pollinating plants, and not just pollinating, but like what plants are most beneficial for insects and birds. Like so many plants or certain plants are hosts for insect larvae, and birds feed on that larvae. I found that really interesting. And it's something that I am trying to introduce more beneficial plants into my landscapes when I can.
Cool.
I love that. I want to learn more about that too. Most specifically, I actually went on a recent appointment and took our chief horticulturist, Andrew Engel, with me, who's obviously a wealth of knowledge. And I learned so much about additional stuff that plants need to survive. Most people think like maintaining, it's just like trimming and watering, but there are so many additional nutrients or amendments that you can add to soils. So I kind of want to just learn more about that. And I know that's like, I don't know, it's such a small topic, but I think it's cool and interesting. And there's a lot of products out there. And then I want to like see which ones actually help plants and which ones are more like natural that could be, I don't know, helpful that I could use at home as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. That's it. That's a wrap. I appreciate you guys joining today. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you to Liana and Phil for sharing their thoughts with us. Thank you to all our listeners for taking the time to be here with us today. If you guys have any questions, ideas for future episodes, or my favorite, constructive feedback, please email us at podcast@johnmini.com. And as always, a big final thank you to all our clients at John Mini Distinctive Landscapes. You guys allow us to make our passion our profession. None of this is possible without your support and vision to bring nature to the places people live, work, and play. This episode is a wrap. I hope you guys have a great day, and always be sure to find a moment in your busy day to cherish the nature around you.